Common courtesy is something that everyone should practice every day. Something as simple as holding a door for someone is all it takes. These people may have appreciated a little courtesy, as opposed to having a door fall shut on them. Another instance in which courtesy may help prevent someone from getting hurt is letting a pedestrian cross the road. Of course, it goes both ways, so to speak. The pedestrian shouldn't assume that a driver will see them and stop. By walking out in front of a car, it places an even bigger burden on the driver, who isn't expecting someone to jump out in front of them. Pertaining to traffic etiquette, a parking space is marked off in such a way that there should be an equal amount of space on either side of the vehicle, so that another car may have enough room to utilize the space next to it without any difficulty. The owner of this blue Firebird certainly didn't have any consideration for anyone else. This guy doesn't look happy. In fact, it looks as though he's getting a license plate number. Maybe he'll report this. But look at this. This guy is getting into the very same car that just backed out of the spot that he parked in. This doesn't seem quite fair. One of the most obvious and most irritating displays of ignorance I have observed today, perhaps because it happened to me directly, is the fact that people saw me taping some footage and ignorantly walked right in front of my camera. I ask, why can't we all be a little more considerate?
These seats will soon be filled with anxious spectators for the upcoming play Little Shop of Horrors, which will be held here in Kent State University's Stump Theater on April 18th. Behind the scenes, the crew works diligently on the set. We're going to ask a few questions, if you don't mind.
Okay.
How's the building coming along for Little Shop of Horrors?
Well, we're catching up. We were a little behind at the start, and now we're catching up. I think we're going to be right on time with all the after spring break. We'll be putting in all our walls here. You see we're building. They'll go in after spring break, and then we just have to put all the trim, the molding, and finish painting them all.
Good. Sounds good. Is there a lot that must be made for this? A lot of scenery that you got to do? A lot of different pieces, or?
Yeah, it's quite a few pieces of scenery. We have a lot of walls, plus we have, if you saw on stage there, we have a couple walls that are lying on the ground right now that are going to be flown in the air, and they have to be rigged to fly up and down, so that it flies up and down.
This is Stump Stage, where Little Shop of Horrors is going to be shown, and we are up almost to the grid, which is 65 feet, so I would say we're about 60 feet up from here, and we can see them working down there on the stage, painting the bricks and the walls that Carl was telling us about. This is quite a very prestigious angle. Much of the scenery that the crew has to build is very difficult to make, such as the mechanical aspects of the set. So what's the hardest piece of scenery that you'll have to make, do you think? The walls, or?
No, I'd probably this operating where we're going to have this will be where the pit is, where the dance chair has to come in and out, raise in and out. That part requires more engineering. Everything else is pretty much straightforward. I think some of the hardest part is when you go to put the molding on, getting all these angles cut right, for the molding to meet nicely all around these corners here is sometimes some of the hardest work, even though it seems like it should be simple. It takes a long time to do.
Okay. I'm Jen, and this is TV2 News on Little Shop of Horrors.
Preparing a horse for recreational riding requires nothing more than a saddle, a bridle, and a lot of love and patience. In this video, we hope to show you, the future horse trainers, how to properly saddle up, mount, dismount, and take the saddle back off of the horse. The first step in preparing a horse for riding is to place the saddle pad on the horse's back, right under the area where the saddle will be. This will help keep the saddle from rubbing the horse's back, which would cause irritation.
This is the saddle.
Next, the saddle goes on over the saddle pad.
The cinch strap fastens to the girth, which holds the saddle in place. Tuck it under. Tuck it through. Pull it tight. Pull it back up through, make a loop, pull it tight. This is the belly strap.
The belly strap holds the saddle in place.
You don't want this tight because it'll make the horse buck because of the air pressure in her stomach.
The next step is to place the bridle over the horse's head.
This is the bridle. It helps control the horse in riding. You want the reins over his head, so in case he spooks or something, he won't run away and have control over him. Bit in his mouth. Pull the ear forward. Ear forward. And you make sure all the adjustments are correct. And then
The strap should not be too tight so as not to choke the horse.
Pull the reins back. You have control. And then you mount. And you're ready to ride.
Always dismount on the right side of the horse. Dismounting from the same side every time allows the horse to remain comfortable with the situation.
Swing your right leg over and just dismount.
After you have finished riding, the saddle and bridle should be taken off immediately in order to prevent the horse from damaging them, and because it's very uncomfortable for the horse to be saddled up for extremely long periods of time. First, we replace the riding bridle with the old bridle in order to maintain control of the horse.
Leave the reins over the neck. Simply slide the bridle over his neck and under his mouth. And put halter in place.
The old bridle is left on the horse at all times. This allows the trainer to maintain control when the horse is set free into the field. Before the horse is set free, we attach a rope to the bridle, which allows the trainer to maintain control while taking the saddle off.
When taking the saddle off, just simply undo your knot, pull out the cinch strap, and undo the belly band. Simply strap that over, throw the girth over, and simply slide on.
Once you become a more experienced rider, you can ride bareback, so as to skip the work it takes to saddle a horse up. By now, you should have a basic understanding of how to saddle up a horse in preparing to ride. The real test comes when you actually get to try it yourselves. It can be a very enjoyable experience, and it brings you closer to your horse. Good luck, and happy horseback riding. This house has stood for almost 150 years and has had very few repairs. One family has owned it for almost 5 generations and farmed on it for virtually the entire 150 years. Carol Rogers, the 3rd generation of the Rogers family to live his entire life here for 85 years, knows the history of this house the best.
Yes, my grandfather bought it along about 1850 or something, sometime in there. Maybe a little later. I'm not sure. Maybe my dad was before my dad. It was after my dad was born. He was born in 1862. So I'm not just sure about that.
The house hadn't always been located where it is.
That's according to my Aunt Anna that lived here so long. She said it was actually built down about where that tank is there, gas tank. Right about in there someplace. For some reason or other, the ground wasn't holding it upright or something. They get it was soft spots or springy spots. Maybe it was springs or something. So they moved it up here, and how they moved it, I have no idea. I don't see how they ever did it. Unless they tore it all down, brick for bricks, and rebuilt it up here. Maybe they did.
Since it is a farmhouse, there had been a barn a few hundred feet from the house. Unfortunately, the barn was struck by lightning in the summer of 1982 and burnt to the ground.
It probably had been built back in the 1800s sometime. After the house was built, I think the barn came along later. Maybe there was a smaller barn or something. I don't know really.
The entire farm had originally consisted of about 80 acres, but over time, some of it was sold for road construction and other various reasons.
Yeah, it must have been 70 acres on the other side of the road before the bypass went in. I think they took about 10. So it must be around 60 acres, I guess.
Because there was no plumbing in the middle 1800s, houses relied on springs for water supply, and this house is no exception.
And there's a spring down there, and I think that's one reason it was built on this side of the road. There wasn't much land on this side. But that spring was there, which was great.
This spring produced a good amount of water, enough for the whole city of Salem, where this house is located.
The spring down here now is interesting. That spring was a good spring, and the city of Salem, about all they had for water was springs. They bought up springs or leased them or whatever. And that's about the only water they got. So they bought the little piece of ground the spring down here was in, and they piped it clear into town.
As cars developed and became a must-have, a garage was necessary.
Well, I built the garage along about 1950 in there sometime. Had it built.
The basement is where much of the food was stored because they didn't have the convenience of grocery stores like today.
Yeah, we kept canned stuff in there, and potatoes, and anything that needed to be a little cool.
The floor of the basement is solid earth, which might have been to help keep it cooler during the summer so that any stored food wouldn't spoil. Soon, electricity developed, and the house was wired to allow for the use of refrigerators, lighting, and heating. A furnace was installed, and the 8 fireplaces that the house is equipped with were no longer needed. Overall, the house has remained the same throughout the past 150 years. The design and architecture of the house represents the simplicity of life in the 1800s. From the stained glass decorating the front entrance to the staircase in the front hall. After 150 years, the house stands tall and proud, just as it has from the very beginning. Just as it had when it was first built, when people built things with pride and dignity. This house is essentially a part of them, representing the hard work and pride that was a part of their lives.